Okay, I think, Nina, we've got some good people still joining. Yes, everybody's logging on. We appreciate there's always a few minutes that everybody needs to get going with. And for those of you that have joined on time, I'd just like to reiterate we'll have a hard stop at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, daylight saving, or 12 in Queensland, or in obviously a couple of hours behind in those in WA and South Australia. I might kick off, I think, Nina, if unless Brian says otherwise. I think we're expecting quite a lot of people joining today, but we understand what it's like. So first of all, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really delighted to welcome you to the launch of the 2025 Recruitment Salary and Job Market Report, and to be here with leaders across the industry from life sciences to discuss our report, but also insights into talent management and workforce strategy in our industry. For those of you that don't know you,
we appear to have lost Catherine for some reason, so I might take over. Hello, welcome everybody. As Catherine was just saying, we are in the process of launching our On Q annual salary survey, which is very exciting. We will be doing that live shortly. I would like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the many traditional custodians of the lands of which we all gather. I'm sure we're coming to you from many lands across Australia. I come to you from the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, but I know we have people from all over Australia joining us today. I will, with that acknowledgement, say that I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and would like to just ask Brian, who's our guru in the background, if you're there, Brian, if you can let Catherine back in if she's able to be there. But we'll just give it a minute to see what's happened while we're there. As we get started, I just will ask you to put in the poll. We've got some really interesting findings. So while we're waiting for Catherine to come back and join us, maybe if we can put in the chat, it would be great to hear maybe some ideas around what you think might be the biggest kind of shock factor from this year's salary survey. We had approximately 1,000 people join from all around Australia. And we have some really interesting stats come out of it. So I'm going to just talk to a couple of them while we wait for Catherine to rejoin us, and then see if you can, I guess in the chat, have a bit of a guess around where we might have gone from and to. So I'm just going to pull this up. Bear with me a second. So we had a really interesting stat, probably our biggest shock stat, and we'll be talking to these, Catherine will be talking to these all the way through, was around the job applicant success rate. So last year, when somebody applied for a job, 52% of people were successful, and now not so much. So what do you think that went from last year, 52%? What did it go to this year? Yes, thank you, Leah, for your comment. Absolutely, double hatting. How many people were successful when they applied for a job this year? 52% last year. What do we think the results showed this year? 25% Mary, that's a good guess. Anyone else? Got another guess, 42, 15. Great guesses, people. Thank you very much. This was our biggest shock stat. We actually went from 52% last year to only 25% this year. So Mary, you were absolutely on the money there. Thank you. And congratulations, being the first person to guess a correct stat. We're going to give you a copy of one of the books we have to give away, either Meaningful Work, which is this one here, or we can give you Culture Map. So we'll get in touch with you, Mary, for that. Let me read you another stat. Obviously, Catherine is having some technical difficulties, and see if you can guess this one. Pay satisfaction. This is a really interesting stat. So last year, 78% of people were satisfied with their pay. What do you think the figure is this year? If it was 78% last year, what do you think the figure was this year? If you can put in the chat this year's figure from 78%, what did it go to? Higher, lower, what do we think? I'll give it a second while Catherine looks like she's coming back in. Candice down at 52, Megan 62, Romit 56. Great guesses. Simon 72. Simon, you are the second winner of a book because 72% is the correct answer. Well done. Okay, I think we have Catherine back now. Ready to go, Catherine?
hello. Thank you, Nina. I don't know. We did test it, people, multiple times, so I'm not sure why I froze, but that is the beauty of technology. And Brian, my IT in the background, if you need to turn off the recording function, happy to do that so we can deliver a live function today if we think that's a problem, but we'll see how we go. And thank you, Nina. I'm not sure where everybody got up to, so I might start again. And I'll just say thank you very much for joining us today. I'm delighted to welcome you to the launch of the 2025 On Q Recruitment Salary and Job Market Report. And I'm delighted to discuss it with leaders from the life science sector across talent management and workforce strategy. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Catherine O'Mahony and I'm the CEO of On Q Recruitment. And I'm pleased to say On Q Recruitment is now 26 years in operation. And this is our 19th year, yes, our 19th year producing the Salary and Job Market Report. And joining me today is Nina Mapson-Bohm, who you have already had the pleasure of hearing from, who's hosted. And Nina joined the On Q Recruitment team earlier this year as Interim Managing Director. So I'm delighted to welcome you formally, Nina, to the first launch of the salary survey for you.
Thank you.
Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet today and their continued connection to land, sea, and community, and we pay our respects to all elders, past and present. So over the past 18 months, we've witnessed some transformation in how life science organizations are hiring, retaining, and compensating their talent. And we've seen that the market has shifted rapidly from an expansion post-COVID through to 23 and up until 24. But what we've seen now is a transformation across the industry towards what I would call thoughtful caution. So employers and companies are more selective. They're taking a more strategic approach to their workforce planning. So today I'm going to walk you through the insights from the 2025 report. And we had surveyed nearly 1,000 life science professionals all across Australia and across a whole diversity of industries and sectors. What I'd like to do is share with you that you will, from the perspective at the end of this session, get access to a copy of the report. So please check your email when you're finished and you'll get a report. So just to let you know, not that I'm recommending anybody prints it out, but it will be it's a very fantastic report and it covers salaries and a whole heap of sections and insights, which I'll go through shortly. So reminder at the end of this session, and we'll be finishing 12 or 1 o'clock sharp, depending where you are, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, you can access the report in your emails. So thank you very much. Today's agenda is very deliberately designed for engagement. We're exploring 5 themes: workforce planning, compensation, benefits strategy, and talent acquisition, and also touching on emerging technologies and employee retentions. We'll be pausing for some interactive polls and there'll be 2 breaks for Q&As. So in terms of, you may have already known that you're very familiar with techniques, but you'll have the opportunity to post questions as we go and as we speak, and Nina will be the moderator there. So what I will do now is just jump into the presentation. So I think I'll know when it goes live. So just from an agenda perspective, we really do appreciate your feedback. So if you've got time at the end of the survey, we'd be absolutely delighted, or at the end of the webinar today, we'd be absolutely delighted to hear your feedback. Okay, looks like we're live. So today, as mentioned, we've got some market trends. We'll be discussing REM and benefits, the talent landscape. We'll pause from questions. We'll be hearing the insights of contributors around the impacts and how they see it at the geopolitical level. We'll be touching on AI and adoption, workforce dynamics and productivity. And then the second half of the webinar will just, for those not familiar, we'll be talking about the salary guide, how to reference it, and how you can use it from the best perspective within your organization and how it benchmarks with that, and then some closing remarks. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with On Q Recruitment, I just wanted to touch base and let you know that we offer a range of services for you and your organizations. We offer permanent recruitment across retained, exclusive, and contingent. We also offer clients an on-hard labor visa agreement, which means we can sponsor highly skilled overseas talent. We offer staffing solutions across fixed-term contracts, casual and independent contractors. And we also have international recruitment networks around the globe. If you're expanding or need to attract talent from the Northern Hemisphere or Asia, we've got life science recruitment partners, which are really great. So if you need us, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, so I think, Nina, you've already had the opportunity to ask one question, but we will be offering a poll and prediction on some key statistics. And if you're able to launch that poll for me, Brian, that would be absolutely brilliant. in terms of what are your predictions on the key statistics? And Nina will let us know at the end who the winner is. And you've the option to receive a culture map book or meaningful work. So that key statistic is the very first one in terms of job applicant success rate. So last year in 2024, our report indicated that the job applicants who applied for a job, 52% were successful. So what I'd like to do is ask you to put in the poll what your prediction is in terms of what the candidate success rate was.
I'm just sorry, we covered this when you dropped out because I wanted to ad lib a bit and keep people entertained. So
Oh,
we've done
yes.
that. We've done the
Have you gone
first
through the
two
whole lot, Nina?
stats. No, just the first two we looked at.
Oh, okay, wonderful. So in terms of the other stats, maybe I won't go through them in detail. I'll launch them at the end and through the report. But what I'd encourage you to do is before we go down is from your perspective, what do you think the most common salary increase was across the industry? What do you think the bonus split was between internationally owned companies versus locally owned companies awarding bonuses? So 80% of people working for an international company received a bonus in 2025. But what was your prediction for locally owned Australian companies? What do you think, if you had to reflect on your own organization, was people's efficiency gains in using AI tools in their day-to-day work, including hiring processes? And how difficult, from your perspective, do you think it's got for hiring managers getting headcount approval? So how much harder is it for hiring managers in 2025 to get permanent headcount approval? And finally, what do you think the number one retention driver is that ranks significantly above all others, the whole cohort? So just if you've got a moment to sit down or to write down what you think the answers to that are, we'll be sharing them afterwards and you will get to hear it throughout. And we might leave common hiring weeks to hire, just in the interest of time. When you receive a copy of the report, you'll see that it's broken up into two sections. And this is what it will discuss. I won't get to speak to all of this today, but I'll pull out the key highlights. You can see we talk about salary, bonuses, talent attraction, candidate experience, what hiring managers are telling us, what talent acquisition's happening, AI adoption. So quite a lot of topics to go through. And then the second half of the report, when you download it, will give you salary information, which I'll explain later across all these industry sectors. So you can see it's everything from commercial, sales and marketing, clinical research, regulatory, R&D, manufacturing, operations, and QA. So there's quite a lot of data for you to absorb once you get the report, but I'll definitely be sharing how to access that. And you'll also have a key. We deal with a very high fact finding, very intelligent audience. And so every year we get a lot of information wanting to know what industries, what functional sectors we cover, how we calculate the salaries. So all that information will be in the report when you download it. In terms of the demographics, I'd just like to say that you can see there was a split between locally owned and international companies. You can see we had a great representation in terms of company size. The two most common sizes are people with under 50 employees, and also with the second most common was over 1,000 employees. This year, the gender split was slightly different. Normally, it's been closer, but 40% male and just under 60% female. So if anybody's got any suggestions on how we can readdress that balance for next year, I'd really welcome them. So on to the key driver in terms of compensation and benefits. What's been happening in 2025? And what are people's predictions? You can see here we've got three graphs, but I'll pull out the three key headlines. 72% of contributors received pay increases, and the most common pay increase was 3%. So that's up from 28% last year. I think it's interesting that it suggests that CPI expectations and internal salary benchmarking data, companies have offered that this year. I think, however, from an employee perspective, for some employees, they could feel that they're treading water with the costs of living, and what does that really mean? In terms of people who didn't receive a pay increase, there's a number of reasons for that. There were salary freezes, or they'd maybe inadequate company performance, or they just returned from an absence of leave, or they were new to their job. I think in terms of one of the key statistics, and we'll talk about this later on in the survey, Normally, changing jobs is a key driver for receiving a salary uplift and a salary increase. And what you'll see throughout this year that it had dropped. So in 2024, 74% of all people who changed jobs got a pay increase. This year in 2025, contributors are telling us that only 65% of people received a pay increase. So still a significant way to get an uplift. But I think that's interesting that there's an increase in people who are moving for reasons other than financial. Salary satisfaction. I think this is where there is some tension between pay increases and that we saw a drop in salary satisfaction dramatically from 78% last year to 58% this year. So people weren't as happy with their salary increases. However, there is a little bit of a disconnect because it doesn't mean that you'll see later on that they're quite happy with their jobs. You'll also see where people will consider changing jobs if a new employer offered them a higher increase, minimal change compared to last year, with 57% saying yes, they would. I think for organizations that are looking at their salaries, because obviously salaries are one of the biggest costs with organizations, it's realizing that the market has shifted in terms of salaries and increases that we saw out of 22 and 23. So there's really been a pullback, but how we continue to communicate that to our employees around that it is definitely the norm. Okay, bonuses. So it was interesting that this year the number of people receiving bonuses dropped from 71% to 62%. A slide I mentioned earlier was 80% of companies received a bonus from international companies. When we looked at locally Australian-owned organizations, that dropped significantly to 42%. Even when we adjusted the data for industries or sectors that traditionally don't pay bonuses, such as medical research institutes, non-for-profit academia and laboratories, and CROs, there was still a big difference between Australian-owned companies and international companies. I think this presents an opportunity for Australian-owned companies to maybe revisit their remuneration and benchmarking strategy, as there's an opportunity even to have a lower bonus of 5%, where it's tied to organizational performance, and to communicate that from an alignment and incentive perspective. For obviously for leaders from the international organizations, there's a very clear global strategy around remit benefits, and it's very clear. There's a very clear framework on compensation. Okay, employee shares and schemes. You can see that 28% of organizations are offering employee share schemes. I think that varies significantly into whether companies are listed, internationally owned. I think what was surprising for me was that 12% of people weren't sure if their company offered employee share schemes. So what I think was we know from another question we asked around, is there any plans with HR leaders to look at long-term incentives as an attraction or retention tool for people other than executive leaders? I can confirm there are no intentions to change employee share schemes or strategies on who's offering them to them. So what is the talent landscape looking like? I think this is really interesting data here. You'll see that consistently over the last number of years, who is thinking of changing jobs in the next 12 months. We've got 30% of people are saying yes, they will, 36% of people are saying no, and 33% are unsure. This is pretty consistent over the last 10 years. I always say to hiring managers, 30% of your workforce is probably going to look for work, 30% or 40% are adamant that they're not moving, and then there's 33% who are unsure. So that's pretty consistent data. I think what the biggest statistic or surprise this year for us was people who'd applied for a job in the last month. This bottom graph, you can see that of people who applied for a position, only 25% were successful in obtaining a role. This is a marked difference from 2024, where it was 50% of people who, when they applied for a job, were most likely to get an opportunity. So I think that statistic that only 1 in 4 applicants are successful in securing a position really speaks to the dynamics of our market at the moment. Therefore, those of you that are hiring, this is extraordinary leverage. Not only are you filling roles automatically, but you could be you can be more selective around the candidates that you're hiring. But those who are managing talent retention, this is equally important, because you know then how tough the job market is for people, and therefore it can inform your retention strategy. I think in terms of people who did secure, 33% of people who did get a role received more than one job offer. So in certain niches, it's still highly competitive. But you can see 68% did not receive more than one job offer. And you'll see later on that's backed up by hiring managers pretty much telling us the same thing. So if you're recruiting at the moment, I think you'll need to be aware that it's on average taking to 6 to 10 weeks to fill roles. And this is indicating to us that managers and hiring managers and organizations feel that they've got more time. So what are hiring managers telling us? What is their plans in terms of recruiting for the next 12 months? You can see that there was some optimism there with 33% of companies telling us it's still planning to hire a permanent headcount, slight decrease with permanent, decreasing workforce. This is fortunately reduced significantly from the post-COVID 22-23. Consistent to the last year, about 15% of people said they're going to continue to increase their uses of casuals. But the overwhelming statistic is 31% are planning no change to their headcount. I think when we look at this data in terms of hiring managers for 2025, how difficult it is to get headcount, the overwhelming statistic was compared to last year for managers, they felt that it was reported it was 60% more difficult to get permanent headcount. Retaining talent was more or less the same, 60% said that. But what was surprising was there was still 34% of managers telling us that it's still difficult to attract the right talent. We have some theories at On Q Recruitment why that is. We believe that getting headcount is difficult. Once you get it, clients are seeing a lot more increase in the number of job applicants. Candidates are using AI. So the time spent in getting the right person. We also know previously from 9/11, EFC and COVID, that in the markets of uncertainty, employees are more or less likely to change jobs particularly if they're satisfied in their current role, and they're maybe not going to, employers don't have the financial carrot to attract them away from their current role. So that's interesting statistic for us. Getting permanent headcount was more difficult, but also attracting the right talent was for some areas 35%, 34% harder than last year. And I'm just making sure, I'm just going to Brian and Nina, making sure, just double checking if there's any questions there.
Perfect timing, Catherine. We have had a question
Yeah,
from
great.
Suzanne. She wants to know, is there any possible correlation to the increased number of job seekers and lower candidate success rates? What's your view on that?
So the increased number of job applicants with relation to the success rate.
Yes. So there's an increase in number of job seekers, but there's lower candidate success rates. Do we think there's
Yeah,
a correlation?
we know anecdotally it's a great perspective. I think what we've seen, and Seek has backed up this data, the number of applicants has increased, almost tripled, but the number of suitably qualified candidates applying has not kept up with that increase. So what we're thinking is people that are in industries where they've been made redundant or there's a threat of their role being annexed, that they are then starting to apply for more roles than they previously did, because historically the year or the previous 6 months they would have got a role quicker. For me, it doesn't necessarily tie into the number of applications. I think it's just the difficulty in companies continuing to have the growth that we've seen in Australia significantly, even before COVID and post-COVID. The international companies, in my opinion, have made a lot of redundancies. We all know that, and they're continuing to do that. And then what we're seeing for smaller companies, particularly our biotechs and startups, they've struggled in some instances to get capital to allow them to progress through their clinical trials or their expansion plans. So for me, it's not necessarily linked to that. I think what we're seeing is applicants from other industries, and AI is allowing them to do that. And there's tools out there which makes it really easy for a candidate just to get their resume sent to any role. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Nina.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the AI piece. We're certainly seeing a number of applicants, and I know you're going to talk about AI later, but a number of applicants come through that we question whether they're even reading the job ads properly. There's almost an automated
Yeah,
process sometimes for applying for things. So I think that's increasing the volume of applicants, but not the quality
yeah,
of
correct.
applicants.
Right.
Yeah. Great question, Suzanne. We're going to have some hopefully time for questions later, so feel free to keep them coming in the chat. I'll just put that little plug in there for the Q&A and let you carry on,
Thank
Catherine.
you. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, I'll jump ahead. So just in terms of what hiring managers and candidates are telling us, hiring managers are saying, did candidates decline your job offer when you went to offer them? You can see that there's less people, 33% are saying yes, that they had a candidate decline a job, but that is definitely reduced from 2024. Why did people decline a role? They accepted a job from another competing company or a current offer from their current employer, but that has also dropped. So just in terms of that, it's definitely, there's been a shift, and the leverage that employers, when they're looking, can take more time and probably have more certainty that when they make an offer, the candidate's going to accept compared to the previous 2 or 3 years. I probably don't have too much time. I'm just looking at this in 29. It's nearly 12:30. But in respect of people who've adopted hiring strategies, there's less appetite for sponsoring overseas candidates. There's an indication companies are going to offer more trainees, take on more trainees, which would be really positive. Mainly 21% have said no change. But there's been a slight increase in declining new projects due to lack of resources. You can see, though, pay higher salaries to attract more talent, that has dropped slightly, but I think that's probably something we're going to see that's continue in 2026. But there'll be an increase in hiring casuals and contractors. Wonderful. Productivity and retention drivers. Okay. So this is a really interesting, and this, Nina, I'll jump to the slide in a moment. I'm not sure if I meant to stop now. Sorry if I've stopped too soon. No, that's great. So in terms of work productivity dynamics, this is a question that we're still continuing to receive questions even as late as 2 days ago from a hiring and HR manager. What are we seeing with respect to returning to the office? Is it going to be mandated in the life sciences industry? I'll have to say that no, we're not seeing that. We are seeing that companies have tried it. But when we analyzed the data last year, there was no mandate. 70% of companies were not mandating penalties or incentives to get people back to the office. The most common number of days that companies want people in the office is around 3. And however, employees are also equally engaged and wanting to work in the office 2 to 3 days a week. But are we seeing what's happening in other industries where we're going to have a 4 or 5 day return mandated to the office, take it or leave it? No, we are not seeing anything like that. And in fact, and I'll talk about this later, flexibility is still the number one driver for all ages and all genders. If you're not offering or you're thinking of bringing that in, we would counsel you to really consider that unless it's a global directive. In terms of, though, tying the working from home and productivity back in, there's a continued feedback from contributors that their personal productivity has increased. They feel it's increased across productivity and meeting KPIs in their team, or no change. Where we see the disconnect and the decrease here is the 17% when you collaborate to make KPIs. And we also see that that's with senior executives and leaders. They observe that cross-functional productivity in meeting KPIs is still a challenge with this hybrid workforce that we now currently is now our new norm. So there's definitely ways to look at how we, as organizations, continue to enhance cross-functional productivity versus just our own teams. Benefits, retentions, and drivers. I just spoke about this a moment ago. I think this is absolutely key. This has been consistent for the last 5 to 10 years. Flexible working hours is still the most common benefit received. But why are employees staying with your organization? The flexibility in how, when, or where I work is still the number one. And I'd just like to reiterate that's all ages and all genders. And it's definitely a retention and also an attraction tool. So don't underestimate that that's not changing. Autonomy and trust in my role, a good relationship with my manager, competitive pay and benefits, and convenient location and desire. So to an earlier point when we talked about people moving jobs and they weren't necessarily doing that for pay, that what's having autonomy and trust and a good relationship with their manager and the team and flexibility are the current reasons and the current drivers. So I'm not sure if there's any questions on that one, Nina. Otherwise, I'll just continue on. And I think the geopolitical landscape, I think I meant to pause here. Brian, just before, I'm just very conscious of time. Geopolitical landscape, we're going to launch a poll in a second. In terms of the geopolitical landscape, I think my key message here is that the majority of respondents were unsure on how geopolitical events are affecting their organization. We talked about hiring, expansion, marketing, branding, supply chain, and costs. We then had to delve down into the data and we looked at what leaders, and still leaders, 35% of all leaders still were unable or unsure of how geopolitical landscape is impacting their organization. So what we did do is we then delved and we looked at the top 100 executives by seniority and pay, and that's where we got some more certainty. What the feedback was that the biotech, medical devices and diagnostics industry indicated they felt the most exposed around supply chain and cost structures. International companies definitely reported high impacts than Australian companies, so no surprises. When it came to customer and investor sentiment, 16% of the senior most 100% executives were still really unsure on how this was going to impact their organizations and their businesses going forward. And customer investment segment was biotechs and also CROs that had the most uncertainty there. However, overall, though, there was some positivity on that geopolitical landscape, with a lot of companies continuing to live with uncertainty and going ahead with their current plans, particularly with some of the Australian companies. They were going to continue and set their business strategy. So we were surprised by that, but that's probably positive news for the sector. I think if we had one takeaway from that, I would just be communicating to senior leaders and boards, is there an opportunity to take your organization up on the journey with you as you identify the risks and what your planned strategy is? Because that may remove uncertainty. So are you communicating, is your organization communicating the risks that you see for the future, but also what the board or the ELT are doing to manage those risks, given that so many managers and so many employees felt they couldn't sort of answer on any of the top line results. We are probably going to do a white paper on this, or we are going to do a white paper on this. So there'll be more information on this to come. AI in the workforce. I think, Brian, if you're able to launch the survey. So how does your organization compare to other contributors? And I think in the poll there, Nina, there should be 5 questions. Do you have a strategy? We've no strategy. We're still exploring. We're in early experimentation stage. There's a clear strategy that's actively being implemented, or we're advanced in implementation across all areas, or we feel we're leading AI in our sector. Really interested in your thoughts, if I could pause there. Not sure if Nina's able to come in. Brian?
Yes, people are answering as we speak, Catherine.
Excellent.
So thank you for those. I won't give away the results just yet, but quite a mix of answers, which is interesting. So I know we're going to compare them to what you're saying. I'll just give it one more second to see if anyone else is going to respond. And also a reminder for any last questions so that when we get to the end, we can make sure we sneak those in. So we'll pop those in the chat. But Catherine, I think everybody has now completed
Okay,
the
wonderful.
poll. So maybe if you switch sides, we'll share the results afterwards.
Wonderful. Okay. So AI adoption and impact in daily operations. I think it's really interesting when we look at this, only 29% of organizations have a clear AI strategy, or this is what employees know. So 30% of employees said their organization had a clear strategy and plan around AI capability. Some 21% said yes, there's some impacts, and others said no overall plan. It's a trial, and AI and digital solutions are ad hoc, with 10% saying no strategy or plan to invest in AI or digital capability, and 22% were unsure. So if you're a senior leader in your organization and you do have a clear strategy, that's possibly an opportunity. I think what was a surprise for us was we know officially or unofficially employees are using and businesses are using AI tools and technology. It's sort of been in the headline for all of 2025. When we actually delved and said, how frequently are you relying on AI tools or technology in your daily business operation? We thought for this industry it would be higher. So you can see here 31% said sometimes, And another 30% said rarely. Really, it was only 21% said they were 6% always, and 21% were often. So are we missing the opportunity with respect to AI and making it more efficiency gains? When we asked the cohort to contribute, has the integration of AI improved your efficiency or productivity at work? 54% said yes, to some extent, and 16% significantly. I think what was interesting was the cohort of 30% who said no notable change. So there's some opportunities for organizations with people so busy to see, are they adopting your tools? Where the feedback we're hearing is most companies are adopting or already have adopted it, but are your employees, are your teams embracing it and using it to its full potential? I'm not sure, Nina, what your results were there when you jumped in. And I'll just go to AI and job applications while Nina's coming back on board.
So yeah, Catherine, interesting. The biggest response was 47% of people are in the early experimentation stage with specific tools, and that was quite different to what we had on your previous slide,
Wow.
which was, yeah. So it's quite a different there. You've got that probably compares most likely to the 21% there. So definitely people are experimenting more. But on the flip side, you've got 18% with no strategy. So versus 11 there. So I wonder if, but we do say still exploring. So just some shifts, I think, in terms of
Some
people's
shifts.
use.
Correct. Okay. I think we know that one of the biggest changes in AI has been with respect to hiring and also job applications. The cohort are telling us of contributors that yes, they're 30% are using it to in their job application and prepare for interview. We know that significantly it's impacted hiring, talent acquisition, HR, and managers with the sheer volume. And it's also increased the time from the perspective of the quality of applications and research that candidates are open to. So I think now we must look at change. We expect candidates to have excellent resumes. We expect the great cover letter. We expect them to be well prepared. What we don't want is them using a digital avatar or having another camera and another screen answering the questions when we're doing team-based or video interviewing. So I think there's some challenges for organizations. We know equally or larger organizations are embracing AI technology in terms of their screening and online, which anecdotally we've had some negative feedback from candidates. So it's a real mixture. It is creating a level playing field. But it's definitely shifting how organizations are going forward. We are hearing 24% of people are saying they're not using AI at any stage in their application, which is really interesting. So I think the takeaway message is that a well-written resume in 2025 is not a signal anymore that someone is a strong writer. It's just a signal that they've got good judgment and they can access AI more appropriately. So therefore, we can no longer, as hiring managers, rely on resumes as a differentiator in the gateway. We need to make sure we're doing a deeper evaluation. Okay, so Nina, I'm going to pause now before we go to the next section of that, just to see if there's any questions from the attendees.
No other questions at this point, Catherine. Feel free to carry on.
Okay, great. Okay, so if this is your first year, your first time accessing the salary and job market report, as I mentioned earlier, when you get a copy of the report, you'll see the industry and the functional sectors. You'll have a guide to what N equals to, why there's some blank spaces, what we do to try and ensure the integrity of the data, such as removing duplicates and outliers. So we put a lot of rigor into it. The survey was open from May 25 till July 25. So if I just jump to the next screen. So this would be an example for those of you that aren't familiar with it. This would be, say, for example, the clinical research biometrics. That will be the first page. This is the first page in this sector analysis, and this gives you the first quartile, the median, and the third quartile. And you can see where we've got positions, where you can see for a CRA, it's 2, the median is 123, with the average bonus being $7,000. So it gives you an indication where we got contributing data. Clinical research is obviously quite it's a narrow field in terms of the number of organizations that employ, but it gives you an indication of where the data goes from everywhere from startup to vice president, director of head of clinical research. On the next page, when you get it, and there's a number of pages, we then break down the contributors by industry because that's the biggest variance. So overall is the combined cohort of data. But when you go to page 2 of the sector that you're interested in, you can see where we got contributing numbers. I would like to point out that it's a conscious decision to put in when there was 1, 2, or 3 contributors, because historically people wanted to know that all the numbers added up. And the feedback has been, we really like to know where we get the data from, and a data point is still a data point. So it's on that basis that we're very transparent, and that's one of the things we're very proud of at On Q Recruitment. You know where the data is coming from, and we're very clear where the industry and any outliers. So if you need an explanation, you can go to the second page. And if I just go through something else we've done differently this year. Sorry, this is just loading. Taking a second. With respect to, we've got commercial, we've put sales, marketing, business development, commercial together. So that's slightly different to previous years. Okay. I was going to say, I don't obviously have the slide there, but with respect to executive leadership roles, the executive leadership roles, to make it an easier roles, a reference guide for executive leaders or people in executive leadership roles or boards or HR. We've combined all the most senior roles into executive leadership. So there's a one-stop there's a quick reference guide when you go to that data. So that's really important. But really appreciate your feedback. And then a recap of the statistics. Job applicant success rate collapsed. It's probably our most shocking finding of the year. Pay satisfaction declined. It doesn't necessarily correlate with dissatisfaction with the role. Job satisfaction improved, which was great, from 23 to 36% for very satisfied. The most common pay increase, as a recap, was 3%. So again, that, in line with the inflation. Your bonuses, there's an opportunity for locally owned companies to think about their rem and benefits with additional bonus structures. AI, 70% of people said that they're gaining efficiency gains, which is great. Despite there being a lack of strategy. 75% of candidates that are applying for your jobs are using AI, which is the new norm. 60% of hiring managers said that they find it more difficult to get headcount compared to 12 months ago. So those are the challenges facing managers, which then on the flip side, there's really a focus from managers wanting to make sure they retain their staff. And flexibility is the number one retention driver and has been for a number of years, and it continues to be the key driver in this market as a retention strategy, but also an attraction strategy. And if you're hiring at the moment, it's taking on average 6 to 10 weeks is the norm. So what I'll do is I will jump out. I've got some more other data to talk to if there's no questions. Nina, is
Hi,
there any
Catherine.
questions?
No, but we thought we could do the poll on priorities because that would be quite a useful one for people to see if you're happy to do that.
Happy to jump into that one.
All right, let's launch that poll then, which you can see has just gone live now. So which of these 5 priorities is your most critical in your organization right now? Strategic hiring and workforce planning, retention and development of existing talent, communication and change management, AI strategy and implementation, or compensation and philosophy. So if you can tick your answers there, that would be great to start seeing. I'm going to give it another minute or 2 just to get a sense of where people are at. I can see people are still inputting, and that might also provide a talking point if we know what their priorities are as we move towards the final section.
And I
Catherine,
think
okay.
And I think just while you're closing that off, I haven't got a slide on this, Nina or listeners, but the good news is the job satisfaction is at an all-time high. So leaders in life sciences are doing something right. And I think employees are also very aware of the current market globally and locally. So the fact that that high satisfaction rate has increased is a real positive.
I think we can close the poll off now.
Yeah, great.
And so the biggest one, interesting. So retention and development of existing talent came in at number 1, 43%,
Wow. Yeah.
followed by strategic hiring and workforce planning, 28%. So despite our stats saying a lot of people weren't thinking about adding headcount, there is strategic hiring is still important to people.
Correct. Yep.
Catherine.
That's actually my next point. So I was going
Perfect.
to wrap up. Oh, that's great. Yeah, my number one recap was strategic hiring over volume. And so the recommendation is organizations need to be very careful about who they hire or they're considering contractors in that gap until they're very certain. And therefore, there's definitely a tendency to increase contractors. So strategic hiring is definitely the way. Retention was my second one, Nina. So got that in reverse as a competitive advantage is really key. So with growth sort of being very cautious, retaining your best talent is your primary lever for being a competitive organization. I think my other message, if I've got to wrap up, Nina, if there's no other questions.
No other, let me just double check. I don't believe there's any other questions. No, no other questions. When you're ready, I can do my book winner announcements, but you finish your wrap up and then we'll do that.
Is the communication to organizations on the complexities about the geopolitical market. If you want to understand how these events are, as a leader, how they're impacting your organization, to consider how you're communicating them more transparently, the challenges, the response, and the implications for the organization and employment security, particularly as you don't want to lose your top talent. AI readiness. What is the strategy, particularly with headcount? What are the efficiencies your organization can do? And the strategy doesn't have to be perfect, but what are the key benefits that your employees can leverage to reduce burnout in this market? Because we're seeing, particularly in larger companies, with so many cuts over the last 12 to 18 months, has been some of that pressure is being pushed down to teams. And compensation, salary increases are remaining common, around that 3%. There has been some dissatisfaction. So just to communicate that you're in line with the market and the benefits, but also those non-cash benefits there are really important to highlight. Sorry, Nina, did you want to jump in and announce the winner?
Yes, so we have, as I mentioned at the beginning, when we were waiting for Catherine to come back in, we have 3 books to give away, either Meaningful Work or Culture Map, so you can take your pick. And we have 3 winners, which worked perfectly. So Mary Flannery, you got the first statistic, right? So congratulations to
Well
you.
done, Mary.
Well done, Mary. That was the job application statistic. Simon Byrne, you got the second statistic right. Congratulations to you. So that was the statistic on salaries. So well done there. And then, without us even asking, Jessica Fine put in the retention as the flexibility as the main retention driver. So we're going to give the third book to you, Jessica Fine. So congratulations
Congratulations.
to our 3 book winners. We'll be in touch to see which one you want and to organise those to be distributed to
Wonderful.
you.
Thanks, Nina. And I'd like to also take a moment to thank the On Q team. This report is an enormous investment. At the back end, we had Maisie and Brian, we had Miranda, our operations manager, and the broader On Q recruitment team. It's a big report. It's something we're very proud of. We really value your feedback. When you've reviewed it, please don't hesitate to tell us what could be better. But also, if you want a deeper dive, don't hesitate to invite myself or the team. We quite frequently get invited into leadership groups where you can do a deep dive either from a management level or your particular sector. So we'd really extend that operation. Thank you for your continued support. And thank you, Nina, for co-hosting and being the back end moderator, and Brian setting it all up. So thank you very much. And we look forward to hearing your feedback and sharing the books with the 3 winners. And if there's nothing else, I'll close the webinar with a few minutes to go. But I'll
Thank you,
stay
everybody.
online for anybody who's got any questions till 12 o'clock. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, team. Nothing else? Done. I'll let you all go 6 minutes early then. Is there anything else, Nina? No? Nina, you were... No.